very first Percy Jackson and the Olympians book was published 20 years ago, and a book that starts off with the main character telling you to put the book down has sparked such a large amount of not only content, but also an undeniable amount of kids that grew up to be adults that felt less alone in their adolescence because Rick Riordan decided to write something down. Everyone wants to talk about how much Alexander Hamilton wrote, but if you really want to talk about someone who was writing like they were running out of time, Rick published 24 books in 15 years between 2005 and 2020. Additionally, he even created space for other authors who were potentially going to be overlooked to play in the same sandbox of bringing mythology to life. Rick Riordan Presents is an arm of Disney Hyperion Publishing, which has published a number of series that all feature different diverse mythology and authors behind them. And I think in general, this part of Rick's career really points to part of why the Percy Jackson series was so successful in the first place, and that was the heart behind it. Children's literature in general, I think, is one of the most important things that we publish, because as much as we want to think about childhood as this sort of innocent period in our lives where everything goes right, that is not necessarily the case for everyone. And I think especially when you're getting to the age of like 4th, 5th, 6th grade, you're starting to feel your own personality, your own individuality, and also sometimes you're starting to feel pretty alone. For me, The Lightning Thief is one of the books that I remember picking up and feeling immediately less alone. Part of that was the fact that it was the very first book that I ever read where a single parent household was actually the norm. Percy Jackson is raised by a single mom, and despite the abandonment that he feels in that life, he finds out that actually it might lead to the greatest adventure he's ever had. And he heads to Camp Half-Blood where he finds out that every single person there has that exact same circumstance. For me, I was raised by a single dad from the age of 8, and every piece of media that I had read had never shown that as a normal circumstance. So for me as a kid, I picked up a series that was full of Greek mythology, of adventures, of these types of big dreams. And all of those cool things were happening to a hero who had a circumstance like mine. And while it's not always the single parent aspect, every time I talk to someone about Percy Jackson and the Olympians, they do all have some sort of story similar. Something on the page that made them feel recognized, something that they were feeling a little bit alone about and maybe didn't have the words for at that age, and a character or a storyline that they held on to that not only made them feel less alone, but also made them feel like there might be more to life in the future. Like there could be a grand adventure that they were meant for. And I think that's what can make media in general so powerful, and why an entire universe that started with a book that was published 20 years ago can still sustain releasing a major budget television show, as well as bringing back these characters for new books. People are always going to be hungry for stories in this world, and that's because a book that originally told you to put it down was so full of warmth, of characters that made mistakes, and a promise that even if where you were right now didn't feel like it was the best place for you to belong, there was somewhere out there where you did. So I've told you why Percy Jackson meant so much to me, but I'm curious if you're a Percy Jackson fan, whenever you picked those books up for the first time, what was the character or the moment that maybe gave you that feeling of being a little less alone?